Good morning.
Good morning.
Welcome back. Thank you for all of the people that have made it back to day 3. This is day 3, session 1 for the recording. And today we've called Living with Simplicity. And the first session, No Exceptions. And I think it was you that came up with the Living with Simplicity. Like, I don't know why you did, but
How would I do that?
Well, I think what I've loved about the principles is it simplified everything in my life. I went from living. Have you got stuff to say today? You didn't get with the program that 10 a.m. was the go to sleep time.
What are you doing?
It simplified my life, and the reason I feel it does that is because however kind of caught up and lost I get in thought, it always brings you back. I spent the first 23 years of my life blaming my past, my circumstance, friends, relationships. I blamed the external for my feeling, for why I was like I was. And suddenly, coming across this understanding, it's like I took full responsibility for my life, for my experience. And I remember saying, I'm taking responsibility, but it doesn't feel heavy. It doesn't feel like that's a heavy responsibility. It felt empowering. And the reason I feel this simplifies life is because if we think our experience comes to us or is given to us from anything other than our own mind, then we're going to feel victimized. We're going to try and control out there.
I feel powerless.
Yeah, you literally feel that you're at the mercy of whatever situation you're in. And so to just have one place, I remember saying, it's like I've got one place to look for why I am feeling like I'm feeling in any moment, and that's to the power of thought. And like Dave suggested, I've got no idea what this power is. We talk about the power of thoughts. If we know what it is, I've got no idea. It's beyond me. And I know we've had a few conversations over the 3 days that I've said, it makes sense to me, but I can see that it's a belief. So some of the stuff to do with when we're talking about the power of 8 healing and all of that stuff totally resonates with me. But I know that it's my belief, and it's not watertight fact for me. Whereas I feel like the 3 principles metaphor, what that points to is like a fact. It's watertight and it's constant. And I know that Keith Blevins and Valda Monroe, when they speak about the principles, they say it's almost like when you get a constant within science, everyone gets very excited because it's a game changer. It shifts everything. And he said it's like he feels the principles is making psychology a science, because suddenly you've got these principles that are constants, and they are a metaphor for love. I think what Linda said yesterday is how Sydney Banks described it, but I don't know if that would necessarily sit so well in the scientific world. It's a metaphor for love, but you can see how they are always existing, always working, always creating for every single being, no matter what. There's no bias with them in terms of, oh, I'm going to work today for that person and not for someone else. And I used to think that I was in the 3 principles when I was in a good feeling, and that I was somehow doing the 3 principles wrong when I was in a bad feeling. And then it's been so cool over the 17 years of being around this, just seeing like they're the constant in experience. Whether it's a wonderful experience or a sad experience or a horrible experience, the constant is that there is a creative force animating us, living us. And I loved Linda's, I realised I had it wrong on the title. Leaning into Curves is the name of her book, not Lean into Curves. But I loved that as a title and how she spoke about it, because coming across this at 23 years old, after so many years of severe anxiety and struggle and worry, it felt like I really did lean into life. And your sister always says, I trust my life. I trust my life. And she's gone through so many different life experiences since she came across this, and challenges, and you see her really lean into it, whether that be sadness and grief at the loss of something, or just total excitement about the potential for something. And I always remember with her, we were going to California with your mum and dad. Well, we were going and your mum and dad were coming to meet us, and then she went, I'm going to do it, I'm just going to come as well. And we had this day planning it and looking at flights and getting super excited. And
we're
then,
going to walk the John Muir Trail, weren't we? Parts of the John Muir Trail.
yeah, and then she called us up a bit later on, went, you know what, it's really not, I can't leave the business as well as mum and dad, and actually it's probably not good financially. I'm not going to come. And I was like, oh, do you feel really disappointed? She's like, no, I've literally been there in my head all day. And she'd been so excited. And then
I'm
she's
so
like,
grateful for the excitement I got to experience.
and I've learned so much from Lise, because she really is someone who fully leans into life. And that is because she has such I don't even really like to use the word grounding, but like she knows this is true. She found something true. She can't put words to what that truth is, but she knows it's true and she trusts it. Hello. Yeah, I'm talking about Auntie Lisa, and I know you love Auntie Lisa. And I've been so inspired by her, because I don't know, I feel I'd been around the principles 10 years when I met Lise, and I create quite a lot of concepts around it without knowing, and it's become quite fixed. And then to see how freely she shows up in life, I remember just sitting back and being like, wow, I've confined myself. And a bit like I was saying about Linda Pettit, she's always been very free. And I think because of my tendency to kind of not want to upset or rock the apple cart, I've kind of felt like there were certain restrictions on how you should share, all of it made up in my mind. And the reason I feel they simplify things is because it's definitely self-teaching. Like, you learn from your own experience, you can trip up, and then it's self-proving in that you change your mind and you have a different experience. You get lost in thought and it feels like everything's terrible, and then you wake up to it and you're back again. And you see that within other people. And at the beginning of the year, we had a really close family member go through psychosis. And I said to you, like, it was scary. I've never seen anybody in that intensity of psychosis and the acute phase. I said, but there's something within me so strong. I know, they're all right. Underneath all of this craziness, they're all right. And all I need to do for them is love them and know that they're all right, even though they cannot see it for themselves. And it doesn't appear that they are okay. And I feel like it probably was one of the biggest tests I've had of my faith in this, because it looked, and you know, don't get me wrong, I had my moments. I definitely had my moments where I thought, wow, am I ever gonna experience the kind of relationship with this person that I've had previous? Will they ever kind of be able to interact in the world in a way that, I don't know, are we ever going to kind of be how we've been? And
she's going to come back.
Yeah, and I think in a way she hasn't come back to who she was before, but she's come back with knowledge, and she sees life very clearly, and has actually blown my mind how such a young person has been able to go through.
Gonna change it.
Go through what she's gone through and then come back. And we've had some short but quite cool conversations where she said, I cannot believe how real it all looked. And I said, wow, isn't it amazing at 15 years old you've got to experience and see how illusory life is, how real what we think creates for us. Like it's not just a movie, we're in it, it's full. And then you've got to step back now and look and see it for what it was. What an incredible thing to have learned at such a young age. And she's faced other challenges since, and she's had dips in moods and then highs, but I feel like we've all learned from the experience, and I know people are all right. I know it. And we show up in so many different ways, and it's just, if we look at behaviour, if we look at what's presented, if we look at the superficial, I can see why we think there's something wrong. If we can look past the behaviour and still see the spirit or the soul or the being that's there, I don't know, it does something for a human being. And I'm so grateful that I got to experience and go through that with her and be part of the recovery and still have her in my life, because I've grown from it and I've learned from it. And I think Dr. Roger Mills, for me, was just a guide to knowing everyone has innate health. Everything has innate health. That the story or the creation, however real it looks, it's not. It, like Dave was saying in Sydney Banks talk, you think it's real. It's not real. And with that sense, you walk in then into life and you get totally lost in it and you think it's real. And then at some point you're like, I thought it was real. It wasn't. And I was having this conversation with my mum yesterday, but you're saying to me that didn't happen then. You're saying to me that the last 48 years, and we had this brilliant conversation, because I'm not saying events don't take place, but I'm saying the way in which we experience it, our reality of it, even our memory of it, isn't permanent. Like, that changes. I often give the example of going back to Thailand. I was there in 2001. I went back in 2012. I was like, I really want to go to Koh Phi Phi. I cannot wait. It's amazing. I remember when the boat comes in and it's this, and I got there and I was like, I must have got a boat to a different part of Koh Phi Phi. And then we walked around this entire island over a couple of days. I'm like, did it change in the tsunami? Like, where is it? And I was walking around the shops and I saw a postcard and I was like, that's it. That's the view. And then I picked up this postcard, looked on the back, and I was like, oh my God, that's Koh Phi Phi. I've actually never been there. But somehow I think I'd seen that photograph so many times, I'd convinced myself I'd been there. And it was such a good example of how tricky thought is and how tricky memory is, because it looks real, but it's not. It looks fixed, but it's not. And over the time of being around this, the amount of situations where I've been absolutely convinced it's been one way, convinced without a shadow of a doubt, and then been shown that I was wrong. And I loved it when we had a conversation with a lady who was an ex-policewoman, and she was just saying, eyewitness testimony does not stand up in court, because people's memories, she said, they'll say that someone was tall when they were short. They'll say that someone
example, didn't she? She said she actually got to watch the CCTV recording of a petrol station robbery. And she interviewed the people that she could see on the video were actually present there. She could see that they were present, so she knew that they were there. And she said one person said he had a motorcycle helmet on. Another person said he was bald. And it was like all these things, like fundamental differences. Like, and she said, but I know that they're there and I know that they're telling their truth, but people see a different world. And that was one of the examples she came up when she started to realize this. That makes sense of why that took place, why that happens.
And yeah, I think we're not saying life doesn't happen, and we're not saying life isn't real. But I am saying I don't think it is what we think it is. It's not what we think it is. She woke up. Well, she didn't even wake up. She had her eyes closed. She was in the crook of my arm. And then I could see that she was starting to stir a bit. So she started making noises and chatting before she even opened her eyes. She's just like, la, la, la. Noises before she's even actually awake. I think she may be a chatterbox. But then I literally talk to her all the time. Like, we're doing this and we're making a smoothie and I'm getting this out of the fridge. And she gets a running commentary of everything I'm doing. So I think the other thing, looking at Lucia has been taking me back to simplicity and taking me back to innocence, and that place that we look for within people that looks so covered up. I can see why people say, imagine someone, they were a baby once and they innocently created ideas, concepts, beliefs about life and themselves. They do the best. We literally do the best that we can to live and to be in this world. And I cannot imagine some people as a baby and that innocence, but they were. And I think that's something that if we can start to remember, each of us started out as this potential, pure potential. And then as we go through life and experiences, we create ideas and beliefs to get through, to be able to survive. Like Dave spoke yesterday about someone we worked with who had an awful upbringing, and she had to create this almost suit of armor, and she had to learn to fight because she was victimized a lot. She had awful treatment from her family, but then suddenly you're not within that anymore. You're safe, but you still behave in the ways you've always behaved. And just being able to spend a bit of time with her and say, you don't need to do that anymore. None of us do. None of us need to. There's nothing to defend. And I think I don't speak so much about the oneness, but I can see that it takes myself and something else to feel fear of the need to defend. And I've had experiences and moments, like little tiny moments, where I've recognized there isn't two. There isn't an external and an internal. There isn't a something and a someone. And they've just, those little tiny glimpses allow me to question. Hang on a minute, like, I think Dave said it the other day, I'm further away from the truth, the more into suffering and struggle and anxiety and all those things, because all of those things take two. Something to be anxious of, something to be struggling with, and everything that draws us closer to truth. You feel like love doesn't need anything but itself. It's total. It's completely total. It's total. And when Linda was speaking yesterday, I sort of love heals. It brings together. It makes one again. And that's the direction we need to look in. One of Sid's quotes is, you have to see in the singular if you want to find truth. And I don't always do that. I'm a human being. I said, we open our eyes, we see outside, we see self and other, like, we cannot help but do that. But it isn't that we're doing life wrong and we're still it. There's nowhere to go. There's no one to be. This is it. This is it now. And I don't know, I think we often get this idea that there's a better version of us that we're moving towards. Someone we need to get to, and I'm going to be more this or less that. But actually, this is the perfection showing up in this moment. And if we're not looking at the content of thought, you've literally got creation taking place. I think that is incredible. And like, it was interesting, like when Dave spoke about his little mini meltdown about the tree work and what he saw, it was so interesting for me to watch it kind of take place and not be like scared by it or think there's something seriously wrong, or some of the things he was saying on the day that he was having his little meltdown. I was like, I knew that he knew that it was just noise. It was just noise in the system. It wasn't more real because the intensity of feeling. It's just noise. And when he popped back out of it, I knew that he'd have something to share or say about it. And it was I've loved watching people wake up to the principles, but be a bit like Dave and become totally says he was evangelical about it, and then get humbled by thought again, because you think you've found something that somehow is going to make you invincible and you're never going to have to experience feelings you don't like anymore. And then you get to watch people go through things and then come back to themselves, and you see that there's a constant there. We get caught up, we calm down, we think everything's terrible, then we have a moment of clarity or peace, even if it's just a moment. Like, we always come back. You see it with any of these kind of extreme emotions. There's always, it seems like it's going to last forever, and then we come back. And I always remember walking along with Dave after we'd been a day of absolute terrible weather, like pouring rain, storms, thunder, lightning. And then around 6 in the evening, it all just completely cleared up. And we're walking around the village that I grew up in. And it was just, everything was glistening. It was amazing light. And I just said to him, I never would have thought that we'd be on this walk this evening. Like, it seemed like it was going to be like that kind of weather for forever. It was just like so intense. And then I said to him, God, that's like your mood though, isn't it? Like, when you're absolutely caught up in a storm of your mind, it feels hopeless. It feels like it's permanent. It feels like it's the only thing. And David kind of looked at me and said, but the thing is that it is the only thing, because there's only ever the moment, and that's it. There's nothing more than that. So it is your everything. That's why it feels like everything. But every single moment is not permanent. It's changing. So that's why the biggest of storms could suddenly become the clearest of skies. It can pass that quickly. And then sometimes there's a few clouds that hang around, and some of those clouds then, when the sun starts to set, start going orange and pink, and they're beautiful. And had it not been for a few of those clouds, we wouldn't have that. And you see, we're so quick to judge our experience and to feel like we're doing life wrong, because we look at the content, we look at the noise. We don't have to do that. We don't have to look at all of that stuff. I spent 10 years in therapy looking at my noise, analysing my noise, and often blaming other people for my noise. Not my fault, because they did that and they said that, and of course I'm like this because of. But I remember describing the principles as like, I've literally lived with such noise, and suddenly it's like that got turned down. Wow, no, I always knew that there was something behind that. I always knew there was something beautiful, because I've had glimpses of it. That beauty is there. I feel like it is the background, or the backdrop. And we think that the veil of thought is somehow thick, especially when it's not very nice. But it's not a thick veil. It's an illusory veil. Thought isn't fixed and real, and we can totally weather it. We're built to weather storms. We're built to experience thought. And I think when we stop being like the quality control of it, I don't think our experience gets worse. Like I think I used to think I almost had to manage my mind, manage my thought, manage my experience, manage all of it. Otherwise, somehow I was going to become a terrible person, or it was going to get worse. And actually, when I came across the 3 principles, it was like the opposite of what I thought. It's like, oh, you don't have to look at yourself. You don't have to think about yourself. You don't have to constantly monitor your experience and judge it as good, right, wrong. Like, oh, that was a relief in itself. I don't have to look at myself anymore. I'm bored of myself. I'm bored of my story. I've been telling the same story to different therapists over and over and over again and not getting anywhere. My story's getting bigger, if anything. And I think that, oh, hi Mel. Hi. Last time I saw Izzy, she was 5 months old and she's really grown. No, she's looking more like Jess. But it's mad. It doesn't seem like any time ago at all. It was like a year, I think, just over a year that I saw Mel, and you see how children really are that. Okay, time has passed. Yeah, suddenly they're this proper little being. But I think I said it on the community group the other night. You get to the point where like words really don't do this justice, because it's not in these words. It's not in any of it. There's been times where I've felt like, wow, I've got these people, I really need to get them to see this about the principles. I need to get them to hear this message. And then actually what they hear from within themselves is so powerful for their life. And it was nothing I thought they needed to hear. I realized I was a terrible judge of what people need to hear. I really want this person to see this. I really wish they could see something around health. I really wish they could see something about relationships. And that's something I feel really grateful for. The years that I have spent with different facilitators, doing different trainings, filming things, is seeing it's not our job to know what someone needs. It's our role as a facilitator to point people back inside to knowing that they have what they need to know what to do, how they need to move forward. Like, I don't want someone to become dependent on speaking to me for knowing what to do with their life. I want people to wake up to what's within them already. And I've seen times when I've had an agenda and I'm speaking to someone, normally it's family, it's easier to not have an agenda when you're not with family, but when I've got an agenda, and like Dave would say, you can feel it from me if I've got an agenda in the way I'm speaking to him, it doesn't go as well. And I think I love the conversations that I get to have with people around this, because it's easy because their life doesn't impact me in the same way my family's does. So I don't have an agenda and I get to sit and listen. And if you really, really listen to somebody, regardless of what they're talking about, you'll realize that there's something behind the words. And again, that's something that Roger used to speak about. And it took me a few years to really get what he meant. It's like, when you listen to someone, even if they're coming at you with aggression or they're coming up with you with judgment, that's never, that's noise again. Like, that's never really what you need to speak to and what to see. What you speak to is the part in that person that's already whole, already has the answers, isn't feeling damaged. It's like it's perfect. And the more that you speak to that, the more you'll see that come back. And I used to love like practicing with my sister's kids, because sometimes they'll just be horrible to you and you'd know they're tired and they just need to like work this out. And it's not a personal insult against me. They're not being naughty. They're literally exhausted and they know that it's coming out. And I just then got to love them through it. And I remember once with my nephew was fighting sleep, and I just sat and held his hand, and he was wriggling around, and he's like, I don't want to go to bed, and I miss my mum, and it's like this. And I said, okay, I know, I get that you miss your mum, I get you don't want to go to bed. We're still sat in bed. And then eventually you'd fall asleep. And it's just silly little things like that, that without the understanding, I know when people said they've come to it, they've realised, like, we take so seriously what's presented to us in words, in behaviour. That's what we look at, and that's what we take personally. And again, that was something that was huge for me when I first came across it. Life is not personal. Other people's behaviour is not personal. What's going on out in your family is not personal, even when it's aimed at you. Even if someone's being judgmental of you, that's still not personal. And I saw it so clearly. That's everything to do with them and nothing to do with me. Does that mean I don't take things personally? No, of course I do sometimes. Totally take things personally and get lost in it. And I think Dave and I have often said, do you think we should share so much about all the times we get caught up in our heads and all the times we get lost? But we don't want to, we're not gurus. We're human beings who feel so passionate about something that saved both our lives. We want to share it, but I don't want to create this idea that there's somewhere to get to. If you understand enough and do enough training, you're going to get to this point and you're never going to take things personally and you're never going to be judgmental. I'm not saying it's not possible, but I can't speak to that because I'm still very much a human being that gets caught up in thought. But then saying that, it's like, of course I do, because even when I'm in a beautiful feeling, I often blame it on Lucia. I'm like, you coming into this world has made me happy. And I don't care that that's an illusion. I'm not going about my thinking about you makes me happy. I'm like, no, I love you and I love you being here. That's just as caught in the kind of illusion of life of you're making me happy or you being here's made me happy. But I don't know, we're here and we get to have an experience and we get to love and lose and like and dislike. Like watching her try food. I don't know if we mentioned yesterday, but we tried her on a mix of sweet potato and courgette, like all pureed. The first, like, because I've been doing baby-led weaning, so she's been holding things. But I had a spoon. I thought I'll just put a tiny bit on her lip and see if she likes it. She'll like, it was the worst thing ever. And it was just, as she looked at me like I was the worst person. I was like, why on earth would you give me that? And I thought, right, I'll try and see if banana's any good. And no, didn't like any of it. And I'm like, well, she's obviously at some point going to eat. Like at the moment, she hasn't eaten anything. We've been trying for a week and a half. She's just like, doesn't like many things or just spits it out. That within her, there's a knowledge to learn to eat. I'll just keep putting the stuff out. She'll learn. And that's the same with all of us. We've got that inbuilt in us. Like watching her at the moment, trying to crawl. Something in her is moving her to want to move. And like that intelligence, that's built into us. And sometimes she gets incredibly frustrated, and I'm learning about when to step in and when to leave, because she's going to learn. I can't keep stopping her from being frustrated, because sometimes learning can be frustrating. When we know there's something we want to be able to do, but we can't quite do it, it can feel frustrating, but it's not a problem. And it's so easy to see in a small child. But then when we get older and we go through our struggles and our frustrations, we think it means something. We think it's real. And it's not to say like her little frustrations, they're real to her in the moment, but at some point she will crawl or commando crawl or bum shuffle, and at some point she will walk, and because it's the direction of the movement of the intelligence of life. And that's the same for us. Like I know in some of the lost chapters of Thomas that Dave speaks of, you know, it says, well, at some point we will all realise Christ consciousness, we will all recognise or be back to. And until then, I'm like, I'm kind of along for the ride now. And at the same time, I feel like, well, if we're already whole, if everything that we think creates character, and that's not true, that thought creates illusory self, that I don't want to fight shadows on ghosts. And going to work on my character or a part of myself I don't like is fighting shadows and ghosts. And it only exists as long as I think it. And as it falls away, it doesn't exist anymore. And I've spoken on community group about something within the principle. So if I could just see something around insecurity and jealousy, like I've got loads better, but still it's something that really kind of really pisses me off. And I really want to see something about it. And having Lucia, I've said today, it's the weirdest thing. I'm so kind of in Lucia world, and I'm so kind of caught up in just being a mum and loving it and loving watching her. This whole chunk of my thinking that has driven me since childhood has vanished. And things that normally would bother me, I'm like, there is literally no feeling around that. And it's been the weirdest thing. I'm like, I knew, and I talk to people, don't focus your attention on what you don't want, because that's giving it more attention and you get more of it. But with that one thing, I've put a lot of attention on it. I just want to see something around it. And sometimes when I've listened to three principles things, I'm like, if I could just hear something around that subject. And then suddenly my attention shifted, and without effort and without trying, it's fallen away. That's how real it's been. It seemed like the biggest deal in my life at so many different points. It seems like the thing that takes me out of happiness more than any other kind of thinking. And then suddenly I'm like, how did that not be there anymore? How has that fallen without me noticing? This monumental thing has happened. And I'm like, when did it happen? I don't know. How long has it been? I don't know. I can't. Is it ever going to come back? I don't know. But I think you'll have things like that in your own lives where something that's been pinpointed as a problem that you want to get rid of has either fallen off your mind for a short period of time or just vanished. Because it's again like that self-proving thing. That's how real the experience is. That's how real that part of myself was. That it can drop away in any moment. And then I look back, I'm like, it's dropped away loads of times. And then as soon as the feeling slightly comes back, I've jumped on it. Oh my God, it's back again. I'm being like that again. And I think that's because we have memory, we look back, we take ourselves and time travel. The principles, I feel, bring us back to like now. In one of Sid's talks, I said, observing life as is. Observing life as is. And I don't think many of us often think to do that, because our stories are so compelling. Like if I get caught up about somebody that I think is annoying me or done something to wrong me, it looks totally real and justified. Until it doesn't. But the moment you drop it, that uplifting feeling, like heart opening, is a really good guide that what's true and what's not. And Elsie always said, where do you want to live? Where do you want to live? Do I want to live in judgment and where do I want to live? Where do you want to live? Where do you want to live? And I do feel like we have way more power than we ever realised. And I think, Sarah, you were saying yesterday, but why does the other song seem so compelling and like just as the draw of it? And it's like, it's our little egos. We want to be right. Like, I had an experience in the summer where I felt really annoyed by someone, and I felt like that I hadn't invited them into my life. And Dave said, I think this is a lesson for you to be able to treat someone like family and love them. I was like, well, that's not my lesson. You've made that up. And like, there's this like massive reaction in me. And I'm like, I know you're right. It's really annoying me that, okay, the direction is towards love, and I probably should just allow myself to like and love this person, but I'm not going to. I'm not going to, because actually I'm right. And I can feel it. And I think that's the beautiful thing. Roger Mills described our feelings almost like the display in a car. Like we have warning lights. We have things that pop up to tell us, okay, you know, there's something not quite right with this vehicle at the moment, you need to pull over. And he just said, you know, our feeling is a beautiful guide to like what our mind's doing. When I'm feeling really righteous and caught up, it's a good guide that I'm moving further from truth. It's not taking me closer. It's not telling me what to do. It's not, and you just said maybe you can start recognizing those feelings and having a bit of time around them rather than just reacting. Because then they're not taking us further into truth. If they're taking us into judgment, negativity, it's not telling us about truth. And like the self-righteous feeling, especially when we think we're right and it's a righteous thought, they're so tricky because you're never, I'm right. I'm going to argue this because I'm right. And everyone gets that from time to time, but you realize if it's taking us away from love, then it's not taking us further towards truth or what we should or shouldn't do. And I definitely feel like, from my own experience, when I move more towards love and away from fear and judgment, life's easier, life's nicer. Where do I want to live? I remember my dad used to say, do you want to be right or do you want to be kind? I'm like, I want to be right. Whereas actually now, like more often, I'm like, no, I want to be kind. Like actually that feels nicer in my body to be kind. And you know, it's been interesting in being part of this community. I've had so much love and kindness, and then I've had a small amount of judgment and stuff when Rudy and I separated and around, you know, doing these kind of events. Do I want to focus on that small bit of judgment, or do I want to focus on all the love and kindness that I've been shown? Do I want to feel, where do I want to live? And it's a question we can all ask ourselves, because this isn't about us telling people where to live. The principles are so free and so everything. We have the capacity to create anything. We can create fear, misery, dread, or love, joy, compassion. Like they're that free. But where do we want to live? And do we want to feel empowered and kind of move in the direction that love takes us, sort of insight, new thought, or do we want to live in the known of what we've always thought and how we've always been? And I used to hold on to so many parts of myself which I felt kept me safe, and like I was saying, they lots of those things have fallen away without me even thinking about it. There's nothing to be kept safe from. There isn't that separation. And like I've said today, since having Lucia, like I've been walking around the supermarket, oh my God, don't drop her. What? I'm probably not going to drop her. I'm like, hold on, don't forget that you're holding her and drop her. I've had the most random thoughts, and I mentioned it to someone, and they were saying, well, that's intrusive thought. And I'm like, wow, you label it that on. It's like, that's mental thought. I'm not going to go with it. And every time I walk downstairs, I'm like, hold on tight to her because you're walking downstairs. And just loads of weird thought, which I never expected to have. I've spent loads of time with my sister's kids and I never really used to get any of that. But it's been so nice to be able to laugh at it. And then I've had a conversation with someone who does call it intrusive thoughts. And I'm like, wow, but as soon as you kind of categorize thought and make them intrusive, it makes them somehow different to any other thought that you have. And then you target them or think there's something wrong with them or you. And I think that's why it's all thought. The whole game's thought. And I think that's been, like, some of the thoughts I've had since having this here, I'm like, glad I'm not being, you know, no one can actually read my mind because they would think I was bonkers. The amount of thinking I've done about introducing food and what I'd do if she choked and like all of that stuff. I'm like, wow, I'm glad I'm not kind of creating a fearful kind of, I just see them for what they are. And I think it's a short minute. Okay. We've got 10 minutes of you. We see it, it's hungry.
She's getting a bit incy.
Hello. Does Daddy not have the right equipment?
I don't.
You're gonna come sit down?
Yeah.
Okay. Lucy, we only had 9 minutes left. You don't work in time though, do you? So you can say, because Dave's not been here, I'd love it if anyone had anything they wanted to ask or anything that's occurred to them to share now.
Annette.
Me again.
Hi, Megan.
Jenny, I loved what you were saying this morning about the 15-year-old. As you know, we have a 15-year-old. And what you're saying is so true. And the human side of me can't help getting caught up in worrying about her. And, you know, she's been brought up in this energy and in the principles and well-being in everything that we've learned, and yet I don't know why her journey is so much struggling at the moment, and I try not to get caught up in that. However, I do get concerned, and then I listen to what you said this morning. I'll go, yeah, okay. I sit back and go, oh, yeah, it's actually, I know it's all okay. And it's like I'm just trying to deal with the human side of me.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I just thought I'd share that because I put it on this morning, middle of dropping off at school and getting everything ready, and then you start talking exactly what I needed to hear.
Well, it's interesting because this person now is going through another, not psychosis, but a quite a big drama. And I often say it's easier because I'm a few steps removed. I'm not mum. And I think just recognizing, I think Linda spoke a bit to it. There isn't really our humanness and our spiritualness. Like we're all, it's all it. You're all right. You're all right in your worry. You're all right in your caught upness sometimes. And the moments where you do see clearly, she'll feel that from you. And you can be honest about the fact, sometimes I worry, I'm your mum. It doesn't have to be more complicated than that, because I'm not trying to, we all had our worries. There was something very strong in me when I got quiet. I knew she needed love. And for us to see that she was okay. It wasn't a constant, like in terms of, I'd get really caught up and go, oh my God, what if you're not going to be okay? And then I'd come back. And I think I love the fact we always come back to something. We always come back
Always.
to, like you said, I've just fallen back into. And that would suggest that's the constant. And that's what's important, is that constant, not the noise, not the clutter. So there's something within you that knows truth and knows illusion. And you come back to it. And I think often we get caught up in the fact that we've got lost or got caught in illusion. We don't ever put attention on the fact we come back to something. We come back, we become sane again. We come to our senses.
Yeah.
Come back to the moment. And I think that's the thing I often encourage people to start recognizing. What about all the times you come back to yourself? What about all the times you see sense? I don't want to talk about all the times you get caught up. I don't want to talk about all the times that life seems crazy. I want to talk to you about, what about those moments where suddenly everything vanishes and you just have a moment of, it's all right. Oh God, yeah, it's all right. And it's such a familiar space.
It's a bit like that time I went through. People have heard this story before, but I think it's relevant to Jenny's story. It's like to Jenny's message in this. When I was asked to do a one-to-one and went for a walk down a beautiful lane with this lady who wanted to talk to me about anger. I said, I want to talk to you, Dave, because you know you've experienced a lot of anger in your life. You know? And I'm walking down this lane, she's telling me all about this 2 weeks ago. She properly lost her shit, as she put it. Properly lost my shit, Dave. Really lost it. So, all right, okay. Listening away. All of a sudden I say, look, stop. 1 minute. Right now, how do you feel? And she said, well, right now I feel really kind of peaceful. I said, it's all right, so let me get this straight. You've asked me to come for a walk with you, do a one-to-one with you, because you want to get rid of a rage that you experienced 2 weeks ago and left you that day 2 weeks ago. Is that right? She said, yeah. It left you 2 weeks ago. It happened, it's gone. It's done. But people have this habit of carrying those events through time. You know, and they really what they're doing is they're judging themselves. And you're never going to find peace in the judgment. Judgment's based in the duality of divided mind. So it's like, then this woman suddenly realized, shit, yeah, that's what I've been doing. I've literally been beating the crap out of myself because I lost my shit 2 weeks ago, and now I've been beating the crap out of myself for doing it. It finished that day. It was done that moment. You know, this is why people often talk about the now. People think that the now is somehow they give it a grace period. You know, well, perhaps we'll live for today because that's the now. No, today isn't the now. Now is the now. Yesterday isn't the now. Tomorrow isn't the now. This morning earlier on isn't the now. This afternoon is not the now. The now is now. But people feel the need to kind of carry stuff through time, beat themselves up with it, tell themselves they're not good enough. It's just a fucking habit that humanity has gotten itself into. Well, certainly the vast majority of Western people, certainly. Oh, I'm not good enough. This reinforces my story of I'm not good enough. Nonsense. Nonsense. But one thing that came to me, love what you were saying about this girl. Families, especially when we're trying to help them from our point of view, without any knowledge of what they truly want for them, for their lives, what they need for their lives, but looking at it purely from our point of view, because we can't see any other point of view other than that. You often come up against resistance. You know, your sister's kids hate the principals. Don't even speak to me about the principals. Yeah, don't even.
Yeah, she grew up around it.
Don't even speak to me about the principals. I'd sooner take psychiatric drugs. You know, and it's like it's challenging.
But the funny thing is, she often asks us to speak to her friends.
Yeah, she's not.
It's like Lewin.
Well, yeah, but no names, but yeah.
Okay.
And it's like, but it's like, people can listen. Many people listen. A few people hear. Listening is what many people do. Hearing is what few people do. But everybody's capable of hearing, but you've got to get out of your preconceived ideas as to what it's all about. Otherwise, you just go looking for confirmation within people's words to satisfy your ego. And if it doesn't line up with your ego, then you will reject it. If you're in that state of mind, if you are in the intellect. you either accept or reject, and you usually accept if it lines up with your way of thinking. That's why, hearing and listening are two very different things.
Mm.
I was just going to say as well, I remember speaking to Linda Amos and about the difference between working with people and family. And she said, the thing is with family, you're like, I want you to be okay so I can feel okay. You be okay so I can feel okay. And we make it about us, and we don't mean to. And it's like, that if you were working with a mother and daughter, it would look very different when you're working with looking at your own daughter. You can see how that kind of getting caught up in needing someone else to be a certain way for us to be okay. Like we were saying, the person who struggled at the beginning of the year has grown up around the principles.
She's had some deep realization around it as well, and shared with us.
And I think then they've still had their psychosis and their depressions, and I think it's recognizing I don't know someone else's journey or path. It's very easy to want to prevent someone from feeling horrible things. And I think, that's because we love people, but we all know that there's been things we've gone through that we've learned from, and when we've gone through it, it hasn't felt nice, but actually there's learning that takes place. And I always said to my mum, you're a bugger for it. She never really wanted us to have to learn our own lessons. She wanted us to learn from her experience. I'm telling you about this, and you can learn from my experience, and you're not going to have to experience what I experienced.
I'm going to tell you how to ride a bike.
Yeah.
I'm going to tell you, then you never have to try it. It's like, I'm going to tell you orally how to swim.
And like I know people who, like in terms of some of the stuff I got up to from the age of like 13 to 23, I'm like, I really, really, really don't want Lucia to have to go through some of those things. I really don't want my sister's kids to go through them, but they're going through their own things. And the truth is, none of us need someone else to be all right for us to be all right. That's the truth of it. It doesn't work that way. And again, that's why the simplicity of the principles brings us more peace when we see it.
It's like Mahima said, wasn't it, in Nepal? After she was stood in the earthquake in Nepal, first earthquake, and everything was falling around it. It's when she had her realization that it truly is a game of thought, when she saw Mika, her little niece, crying because the earthquake had stopped. She enjoyed the earthquake. She thought it was fun. And Mahima suddenly fell into this space of clarity, and she organized the house. So when the next earthquakes hit, they were on the ground level, so they could just go straight out. And she organized the neighbors' houses. She was like a beacon of sanity in a city full of people who were really lost and in pain and worrying and in fear. She said, I knew I wasn't physically safe, but I was psychologically safe in that moment. But she also said there's something really useful to people who have lost the plot, for a better word, who are not in a good space. To have somebody around them who is insanity. There's something really useful to those people. But our habit is, if somebody's really struggling and suffering, we fluff around them and we join them in the water, in the worry and the anxiety, and we confirm their story to them. And no, that's just feeding the story. This is why we share this understanding. This is for us first. It has to be. If anybody is listening to this in the hope that they can find something that they can share with somebody else, forget it. They're not interested. What they are interested in is how you show up. They'll be interested in that. They'll certainly be interested in that. They'll be interested in you, in the individual, whoever it is. They'll be interested in them being kind and loving and seeing how they show up. They'll definitely be interested in that. But if you're looking for information to pass on to people, forget it. They're not interested. They're just not. And the sooner we get our heads around that, it's like the more we start to look after ourselves, the more useful we are to the world, because we're no use to the world in worry and anxiety. We're no use to somebody who's suffering from anxiety when we are in anxiety, joining them in exactly the same cooking pot. It has to be about us realizing that it's their life. We can love them. Like what happened with our friend, the only thing that came to me was love and patience, love and patience, love and patience. This person with psychosis, love and patience, love and patience, love and patience. And when I've run out of love and patience, love and patience, and that goes for me as well, towards myself. When I've run out of love and patience because I feel like shit, I've got to find that. I've got to realize, no, love and patience for me as well. You're allowed to get upset. You're allowed.
I was just thinking one of the examples of that, we all have prayed, but we were so exhausted one night because it was our shift. It's 3 o'clock in the morning, and this person was saying that they were going to run away. So they were packing their bags.
She'd taken sleeping tablets, hadn't she?
Yeah, they'd been prescribed sleeping tablets to try, and it was 3 o'clock in the morning, there was no sign of sleep. And they were like going around the room looking like Gollum, actually, out of Lord of the Rings.
She looked like, if anybody's seen Labyrinth, has anybody seen Labyrinth, the film?
Yeah.
Yeah, so do you remember that little lady who lives on the tip and she's like, how's about a little horsey? She looked like
It was mad. And I think we've been, and it got to the point where we were so tired, we're like, do you know what? You've been saying you're going to run away for the last 3 hours. If you can do it, can you just do it?
Can you go now?
There's the key. Can you go? And they went, well, I don't want to run away now. And I'm like, what? Come on, if you want to go, go. We want to go to sleep. It's 3 o'clock in the morning, and it wasn't us trying to like reverse psychology her. We just had enough. And I'd actually lost my compassion and patience. I was like, I need to go to sleep. I'm quite heavily pregnant. Stop it. And it was so funny because then it completely shifted, and it was almost like we'd almost been buying into the seriousness of it. You know, the situation seemed serious. You've been given sleeping tablets, you're not sleeping, you're saying you're going to run away.
She didn't sleep till 11 o'clock the next morning. No, 1 o'clock the next afternoon. It was me that went to bed at 11 o'clock the next morning.
But it was so interesting because I thought the more we bought into it, because it looked so serious, the more we were validating her story. When we actually got exhausted and we couldn't buy into it anymore, like whatever, it was interesting what that did for her. And I think that was just a beautiful example of when we got out of seriousness and just were like, okay, go. Because in my mind, I was like, what's the worst you can do in this tiny little place in Dorset? You've shown no signs of, you know, suicidal thinking or anything like that. Go and have a walk at night. Do what you want. I need to go to sleep. My seriousness went, and she felt that. I was like, no, I don't want to do it actually. I want to stay here and watch Netflix for a bit. Okay, let's do that for a bit. I'm going to fall asleep.
In ×2.
Oh yeah, we had to watch it in double speed, triple speed, then in slow motion. We only actually watched about 20 minutes.
Anyway, it's break time.
I know, I was just going to go till 10 past.
Right.
But yeah,
So we'll come back. We'll have a 15-minute break.
So if we come back at 25 past 11 UK time, so it's 15 minutes. And it is called?
It is called Infinite Creator. I love this. I thought it's all it anyway to make a difference.
Yeah, thank you,
Lots of-
Chantal.
Yeah, thank you, Yvonne.
Okay.
And Kendra, loads of love.
This is session 2 of day 3, and we've called it Infinite Creator. And actually, again, they came up with the topics for today, and I know this is one that you love to speak to. But I haven't put it in for the morning, it's this afternoon. But if anyone did have anything they wanted to ask after this session, please feel free. Either type it in the chat or yeah, or just ask. If not, that will be what we speak to until lunchtime.
What you want to do, you want to do. What What's I'm a bit confused now. What's
So you're going to speak infinite creator.
Oh, we thought you asked these. We moved.
I know, I was seeing no one's up, put their hands up. I was
Right.
just seeing if anyone got any questions or wanted to speak about this morning. It looks like a no, so would you like to speak to it?
Yeah, do you want to?
I might chip in, but it's your topics. If I see where you go with it,
It's just words, isn't it?
we've had a bit of a whirlwind break, so we've just both come sat down and gone. Oh, oh.
It's that Anne's job first. Connected? I think we're in. Yeah, somebody said to us the other day. I think it was something along the lines of, now I might be getting this wrong, but along the lines of, I wonder when Lucia will start to think. Who was that? Just,
Isn't my mum?
isn't your mom?
Well, I wonder what she experiences because she hasn't got thought yet or something.
Yeah, she hasn't got thought. That was what it was, something along those lines. And we put Jen and I talked to her like, what? What do you mean she doesn't have thought yet? Well, she doesn't know words. So how can she have thoughts? Bless, what a limited idea of what we think thought is. I don't mean that disrespectfully, but it is a really limited idea of what we think thought is. You know, we think that thoughts are words. No, words came from thought in the first place. Somebody had to think up the word in the first place. So words come from thought. That's why the sentence in the beginning of the Bible, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Really, I don't know exactly what was meant by that statement at that time, but words come from thought, which is where I feel like like we mentioned in the first day, the gentleman who translated the original biblical text came back and said to his wife 20 years before she came across the principles, no, I translate that as in the beginning was thought, and thought was with God, and thought was God. So the idea that babies don't think because they don't have words, I mean, no, she doesn't have any words, but there's something that's incredibly interesting to her about an upside down book with a cup on top of it. I noticed, Deb, you just put your hand up. Do you want to say something, or do you want me to carry on speaking? What's the crack?
I would love to, but finish your thought and then I
Say
can
that again, look.
finish your thought and then I can go.
Okay. Yeah, any concept that we have for the power of thought is not it. Again, concepts come from thought. All concepts come from thought. Jen, I heard Jen this morning speaking about people come across the principles, they have a great big awakening, and then they kind of channel off into another direction, and they go, oh, the principles is a load of crap. You need to look at this, you need to look at this, you need to look at this. All these concepts that are actually being born of the principles, all these concepts that are actually being born of the power of thought. The universal principle of the creation within consciousness. Everything comes from it. Every single word, every single concept, you can't have an experience. Whatever is coming to Lucia now is coming by a thought. In a moment ago, though, that thought wasn't within her consciousness, then all of a sudden it comes and this little bit of frustration comes out. Or as it appears to me, I perceive it as frustration, whatever it was to her. But even at a tiny state, there is a conscious thinking experiential being. Thinking probably more in alignment with pure thought, pure experience than conceptual realities that we dream of, because we are conditioned with thoughts and beliefs and words. One thing I noticed about Lucy is she can be in an absolutely foul mood 1 second, next minute she's laughing her head off.
And vice versa.
And vice versa. She's not the lady who 2 weeks ago lost her shit and is still living and dwelling in it. She's very, very much in the now.
Very much in. I'll get it.
You have to mark that down. Yeah, she lives in the now. We all live in the now because the now is all that exists. And I want to talk a little bit about now. I don't know, we tend to think of the now. It can be, like I was saying just before break, we could tend to give ourselves a grace period within the now. Perhaps it's a minute, perhaps it's 5 minutes, perhaps it's a couple of hours, perhaps it's a couple of days, perhaps it's a week. Perhaps we don't even consider the now, so it's an entire lifetime. Perhaps we'll include in the now this afternoon, the day, whatever it be. But the now is a very specific thing. It is now. Here it is, right here, right now. This is all that there is. This is all there is. And we tend to think of now as being, some people say it's the only time. Yeah. But time is an illusion. So to associate the now with time starts to, if you look at it, it starts to make no sense. Come back to the now. Well, there only ever is the now. So let's look at the now. What is the now? The now is the moment of creation. It always has been. The now, you could say that the now is another word for creator. It's got nothing to do with time because time is an illusion. So to have now as being a basis within time, like the moment as being anything to do associated with time, we've started to drag a bit of the illusion into the truth of the now. And in order to start to really fully understand the now, we must let go of that. We must start to realize that the infinite creator isn't something that takes place in the future. It's not something we're going to meet after death. It's not the space from that was around 2000 years ago when Jesus was speaking about it. It's the only thing that actually exists. It is the now. It is the now. Time, what is time? Well, time is a story created by memory and imagination. It's not to say that things haven't happened. Things have happened. But they existed in the now always. They've always existed in the now. These events took place within the now. They are remembered in the now. They're experienced in the now. There is only the now. Creation taking place in the now. Our problem starts to come when I remember listening to, what was it called? What was his name? He said, all suffering is created from the illusion of time. All suffering is created from the illusion of time. Think about it. It's worry, anxiety. They're always based in a future event. Even if the future is, oh, what's the next moment going to bring? What's the next moment going to bring? What's the next moment going to bring? What's going to happen in the next minute? Or what happens if that happens? What happens if this happens? It's always based in an event. It's always based in time and imagination. Julie and I once went for a walk and we were having a crack and we said to her, did you know it's impossible to worry about the future? It is totally and utterly impossible to worry about the future. You know, people think that's nonsense. Of course you can worry about the future. I want to propose something different. What if it's not nonsense? What if it is true, it is impossible to worry about the future? What would that do for humanity if it woke up and realized it is impossible to worry about the future. The future doesn't exist. Look around. Where is it? When you look closely, you'll start to see it doesn't exist. And the only thing that we are really suffering when we think we are worrying about the future is actually a creation that we've created, whether that be an image, whether that be a sentence, however that thought is manifesting itself for the individual. What we're actually afraid of is that thought. We see that thought, which creates that emotional feeling state, and we worry, and that we call that worrying about the future, when in actual fact, what we're experiencing is an uncomfortable feeling state created by an imaginary thought that we then associate with time, which doesn't exist, because there's only the now. The future and the past are illusions of the now. But this infinite creator, infinite, creates the illusion of time. Thought. The now has got nothing to do with time. The now is the space from which everything emerges. And it's the only thing that's ever taken place. That's why people suggest that people do come back to the now. Come back from where? Come back from thoughts. You can never be lost in time. It doesn't exist. You're lost in thoughts. We're lost in thoughts. I'm lost in thoughts. I'm preoccupied with thoughts. I'm mesmerized by my own thoughts. I don't know, and I've thought about the future and I've had horrible experiences. When I look closely, what I discover is I've created an image of what I think that scenario may play out like, or this possible scenario may come into being, but it hasn't. What I'm afraid of is my own images, my own imagination. I'm afraid of my own imaginations, imaginings, my apologies. It's amazing. This infinite creator within ourself, as ourself, we are it. Creates all kinds of illusions that I never questioned. I didn't question it. Why would I? It's reality. The moment I opened my eyes when I was younger than Lucia, when I was first born, I started to see it. I started to create ideas of what I like and dislike, and it scares me. And I never contemplated for a moment that this was truly a spiritual reality. I thought it was fixed, hard, and real. And that's where I went with my life until I was 33 years old. That's how I lived my life. Thinking that nothing can change, because this is who I am, and I was afraid of who I was. The scariest man I'd ever met. Nothing can change. A leopard can't change its spots. We're not leopards. And leopards don't need to change their spots. They're perfect. Everybody's looking for freedom. Freedom from reality, or freedom within reality. That's what we call our company, Freedom Thinking. As well as the fact that most of the other good names, domain names, have gone. But the freedom's always there. The freedom's there even in the suffering. We have boundless freedom, infinite creator beings. Look at us. Look what we've achieved in this world. We're so infinite. There are people on this world who are so beautiful and kind and loving, who want to do such beautiful things. And there are people on this world who want to destroy populations of people. It's all within the bounds of the infinite. All within the creative force of the now. The now is not a moment in time. The now is all there is. It is the creative source. Everything. It's timeless. Our thoughts have power. When we grant it, they create all our actions, all our behaviors. They create all our words. They create the agreement to agreeing with the word, which never really happens. Everybody hears a word differently. Everybody's hearing this conversation differently. Hearing the same words, but everybody's having a different experience. It's important to remember that. Makes our life easier. Freedom is all there is. With the ability to create prisons within our own mind. Tunnels, like my mother's tunnel. Narrow-mindedness and tunnel vision. Only seeing in one direction. Thinking we're right. They're wrong. Kind of what some people in higher positions tend to do. They tend to try and create a singular narrative. You know, there's the reasons why big business spends millions and billions on advertising, because they know that in order for you to buy their services or product, you have to think about them. Advertising is all about getting into your consciousness. Our consciousness. Want to be part of our realities. because it can only be part of our reality if we think it into being. Everything, anything can only be part of our reality if we think it into being. Jeremiah's nephew Archie said one time to his granddad, comes wandering through, Pete's reading the newspaper, 6 years old, couldn't really speak very well, and was wandering through. There's trouble is, granddad, you don't know what you don't know. I think life's hilarious. Turned around and wandered out, and Pete just said, I just put down the newspaper and I contemplated what that 6-year-old little boy said. Trouble is, granddad, you don't know what you don't know. I think life's hilarious. You haven't thought it, it's not part of your experience, it's not part of your reality, you don't know. If you've thought it, it's part of your experience, it's part of your reality. Because that's how it works. This is how reality is born. Reality is ultimately the experience that we encounter as our life. That's what reality is. That's why there's infinite realities on the face of planet Earth right now. Infinite realities. There are people who are trying to convince us there's only one reality. If you don't see it, there's something wrong with you. It's nonsense. There's infinite reality. It's been the way it has been like that for thousands of years. It's how wars have started. Trying to create a singular narrative around groups of people who we must all agree to, and if you don't agree to it, then you are a problem. And in history, people have been killed for the way they think and believe. But it was still true back then. People are still ridiculed and held down for the way they think and believe. Everybody's entitled to think and believe and create however they wish, because everybody is the same boundless force. Just some people use it to create insecurity. And when they create insecurity, they then set to trying to control the external world because they think that's where security truly lies. Whether that be on a at-home situation, within the domestic home relationship, or whether that be on a collective social. People are lost when they start doing it. And that's why this message is so important. This is why it's so important to wake up to how reality works. Because once you start to see through it, you start to realize, one, you're never limited. You're never who and what you thought you were. You're magical. Every single one of us is magical, inexplicable, divine, force, creator, nowness. We're not the limitation of our ego. No matter how, I heard somebody say today, so compelling, so compelling. It might have been yesterday, in fact, so compelling. The fear is so compelling. It is. Doesn't mean it's real. Doesn't mean it's more real. It's a real experience, you truly experience it, but it doesn't mean that it's a fact. What we're worrying. All realities are real. That's the mad thing. all realities are real and false at the same time. It's like a dream. That's why the mystics have called it the dream of life. When we fall asleep, we think we go into a different modality of experience. We dream dreams that look very, very real. I don't know, I've started to notice, and for some reason I've started to look for the detail within my dream. Whilst I'm asleep, I remember looking at an insect and seeing, oh, as a little beetle, I could see all the detail in the beetle, detail that I couldn't come up with within my intellect. I was fascinated by this beetle in my dream. I'm still fascinated by it when I think about it. It was so real. When you dream, when you're chased or you fall, your body will respond. You will release adrenaline and cortisol, even though you're safely tucked up in bed. Have a nightmare, see what your body does. Your body doesn't know the difference between you being chased in real life or being chased when you're flat out on your back, safely tucked up in bed. It doesn't know the difference. The body doesn't know the difference. Why? Because the body is responding to thought in exactly the same way as it does when you are awake. There isn't two modalities of working, asleep and awake. There is only consciousness creating reality. That's why dreams look so real, vivid. That's what we talk about. It's so interesting to us because they're so real. They are real realities, but they're also not real at the same time. They're real insofar as we experience it as our life in that moment. But we could experience in an infinite amount of other ways as well, and that's what we do. We're always constant state of change. Look for the change, like Jenny said. Look for the change. Notice that when we are in suffering, we come out. Most people don't appreciate the coming out unless they're too busy analysing the suffering. There's nothing to analyse. Why would you analyse thoughts? Spend your life analysing thoughts. Seems like a major waste of time. What people do, they spend an awful lot of time analysing thoughts. I can from time to time as well. Biggest waste of my time. What's happened's happened. It's done. It's gone. It's gone. It's over. No matter what it was, it's over. It doesn't exist anymore apart from in thoughts. People are already free. They're free to analyze it or not. You're free in the analysis and you're free when you're not analysing it. But the prisons that we encounter are the beliefs that we hold. When we take the infinite creator and use it to create what appears to be solid, unmovable ideas. Well, that's Jen, do you want to say anything? And then we'll go to Debs.
No, I'm happy to go to Debs.
Deb.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much. Two things came to mind, and it's so funny as you're talking about them now, because one of them was from yesterday, but it's such a gorgeous story that I wanted to share it. The first thing, though, that I heard this morning, and it's so helpful for me to simplify things, is the story of Neshama and knowing what to do. The story of you and Jenny knowing what to do in that situation. And I think sometimes when we're speaking to groups or even one-on-one, we can share that that's the way to do it. Where in fact, what I see is that how gorgeous in the moment you knew what to do that was right for that situation. And how gorgeous in this human experience that we have the full range of emotions. And, you know, for me, if a rainbow was all purple, it would be cool. But what makes it so beautiful is the contrast. So as humans, anxiety comes up sometimes, worry comes up, concern comes up. But for me, what I see now is that's just my red flag to just pause and pray. You know, seek that wisdom, get that guidance for what my next right step is. Because what was right yesterday may not be right today. And how simple that I don't have to figure it out. You know, I look at us as, you know, like a cell phone. This gorgeous cell phone has immense amount of apps where you can access anything you want. But if that cell phone's not plugged in, you have no power source. Well, for me, that power source is God. The infinite intelligence behind life dwells within me, but is not me. And how gorgeous that there's that grace there that holds me, that I can rely on, depend on, regardless of the situation or circumstance. And the more I get to see that, the more I trust it. You know, and sometimes it's easy to trust and sometimes it's not because we're human. But that knowing that we're always okay, no matter what, has brought me so much peace. Second story I just wanted to share yesterday when you were talking about the consciousness in animals. We have a butterfly garden in our backyard, and it's been a source of such wonder and joy to watch the whole metamorphosis process and how I don't have to do anything except witness it. You know, like the caterpillar knows how much to eat. The caterpillar knows when it's time to go into chrysalis. And, you know, and the change that's happening in the whole time, the caterpillar knows exactly when it's ready to emerge. But we had this one instance that was so gorgeous. My dog had the sweetest little pup, and she's not feeling very well at the moment. But she was about a year old. And we had taken some of the caterpillars and put them in an enclosure because the birds were eating too many of them. So we had it in an enclosure, and one morning I walk by and I get to see this butterfly being born, which was just magical, and the struggle it went through. But the knowing that if I tried to cut it out, it would die. You know, it needed to go through that struggle to get the blood into its wings, to strengthen enough that it would be able to survive. So as I'm watching this, I put my finger in the enclosure and this little baby butterfly landed on my finger. And it was gorgeous. And all of a sudden, my puppy started to just gently bark. And she went "Up, up," to tell me that she wanted to see it. So I took it out and I bent down. And this little pup stood up on her back legs and kissed this baby butterfly. And it was just the wonder of that moment was so gorgeous. All of a sudden, the butterfly flies to the top of our drapes, and we had like 16-foot ceilings at the time. And I'm like, oh my, how am I going to get this butterfly out? And my mind's going in a million directions. And then all of a sudden, I just paused and prayed. And I'm like, the peace was that I would know when this butterfly is ready to leave, and I didn't have to worry about it. But the dog sat there for 3 hours watching the butterfly, so in awe, so present to the beauty of this miraculous little creature. And then all of a sudden I hear, roof, roof. The butterfly had flown down onto the handle of our French door and was ready to leave. And the dog was telling me that the butterfly was ready to leave. And it just reminds me that there's so much that we don't understand, that we don't need to figure out, but we can just be so present to the awe of those simple moments. Because for me, if I try to put words or language around it, I'm back in my head again. But when I can just drop into that moment of just gorgeous beauty, it's right there in the simplest, most miraculous ways. You know, and all a gift from God, all a gift from the divine intelligence behind life that we get to. We have the honor and the privilege to bear witness to these things. And it happens when we slow down and trust. So thank you so much.
It was beautiful, Deb. It was so beautiful, though. You know, this is it. The reason why I do share my insight into nature is because I want people to, my hope is that people will start to realize they're bigger than what they ever thought they were. It's massive. It's so vast. We're so vast. We're not limited in any way whatsoever. None of us. Jen, do you want to say anything? I'm going to tell one of my stories that I've told so many times, but it's one of my favorite moments in my life. And it was when Jen and I were out in South Africa and we went to a soup kitchen and a man walked in and he was carrying bags. There was 300 homeless people in this room, and this man came in late. It was all different gangs. They were watching each other. You see different parts of the room, they wouldn't take their eyes off one another. There was a lot of scared people in that room, and there's a lot of people having fun. I, as a white man, because there was only 2 homeless people who were white in this Cape Town soup kitchen run by our friend Kerry. that I hadn't had any problems being a white man there until this man walked in. He was massive. And I went to go help him with his bags, and I looked at this enormous man, and his face was all beaten up, his terribly bruised face. I said, wow, what's happened to your face? And he said, I was beaten. 4 men came into the park and took my things and beat my face. I looked at this man and I said, wow, that must have been terrifying. And he said, looked down at me and he went, scared? You'd be scared? I said, yeah, I think so. If 4 men came into my room and beat my face and took my things, I might be scared. And he just looked at me and went, I'll never be afraid of my brothers. He was pointing at me. I will never be afraid of my brothers. The only person I need to be afraid of is you. I shit myself. I was thinking, please don't kick off now. God, what then? And the only thing that came out of my mouth was, why, what have I done? That's what I said to him. Why, what have I done? And he just looked at me and went, you white man, you suppress me, you suppress us. I'm not saying white people haven't done terrible things to black populations. I'm not one of those people. And I looked at this man, I didn't know what to say, really. I was so kind of gobsmacked that I was having this happen. And the only thing that then came out of my mouth was, I'm so sorry that you're experiencing that. Could you please point to the suppression? Because I want to do something about it. So I stood up in the middle of this room, people all around us. And this man, well, what do you mean, can I point to it? I said, please, can you point to it? I said, because if I can see it, I want to do something about it. I don't want you to experience that. How can I point to it? I said, I'm so sorry, mate. He said, you're going to have to touch it because I can't see it. You have to touch this suppression. How can I touch it? The South African black-white divide is one of the deepest beliefs on the planet. Jen and I have experienced it firsthand. We've seen it, the way it shows up in society, shows up in individuals. And I got to have a conversation with this man. That kind of opened up this door for a conversation about a bit about my life. I seem to remember. I don't remember much. Apparently I spoke to him for 20 odd minutes or something. About the nature of reality. What I'd discovered. And this man suddenly burst into tears. Massive man burst into tears in front of me. And he looked me square in the eyes and he went, my brother, you've just set me free. Explain to him how reality comes into being. We have to believe it into being. We think it into being. You think it, you experience it as your reality. It's done unto you as you believe, as Jesus would say. And he just looked at me and said, my brother, you just set me free. He flopped back into this chair and I sat down in front of him. He leant forward and we hugged and I cried. And we both cried. And we both hugged each other and we were both in love. We both fell into this space of pure just love. It all looks so real. All looks so fixed. It all looks so true. Again, I'm not saying white people haven't done horrific things to black people in South Africa and around the world. not saying that. But in that moment, that man saw where his experience of suppression came every time he saw a white person, where his horrible feeling came from. It came from a belief that that man carried, because I wish that man no harm. He looked at me and he said, "My brother, you set me free." And I said, "No, brother, you set you free. You did it." A hero in my book. A man to this day I think about, and I send him love. And I do, I love that man. I dearly love that man. Only got to meet him once. He was the last person to leave that building. So quietly snuck him a load of cakes, because all hell would have broken loose if people had known that. And he walked around dazed. You could see him. He had this kind of cute smile on his face. Massive man, 6'5", 18 stone man. He had this kind of face where he looked like Lucia looks at things, where all of a sudden everything looks new. He's like, wow. You can see the wow on his face. None of it's fixed. We're all free to think again. We're all free to let go of even our most deep-seated beliefs, because that's all they are, they're thoughts. And the moment we do so, we generate a whole new reality, because that's how reality comes into being. The experience that we experience. Don't confuse the external world for reality. Even the external world is an internal event. The external world is a perception of consciousness. People and events that take place are all events within ourselves. Stories, fables, myths. Sid said, "There's no outside, there is no outside." That man suddenly went within himself, saw his illusion, brought it into the light, and it vaporized. That's how powerful that one was. It's how true and real and fixed it was. It vaporized the moment he drew it out of himself and looked at it. The moment he realized how reality worked. The moment he realized he was not a victim. You don't need to look at every single belief you hold. You just need to understand that the way we think creates reality. And let the magic do its work. The power of thought creates reality. And then let that magic do its work. Little girl. Hiya, Baba. We just need to realize something. The man who was talking about yesterday, that Jen and I put a video out about, whole life changed. We videoed him. This was after a 2-hour session, 20 years in the psychiatric system. After a 2-hour session with Jen and myself, he was free. And we asked him, we said, is there anything you could pinpoint that was the catalyst for your change? And he said, yes. Oh, what was that? This was a man diagnosed with depression, agoraphobia, chronic agoraphobia. What was the other thing? Something else, wasn't it?
Anxiety.
Some kind of anxiety of some description. He said, yes. He said, it was the moment I realized the past no longer exists. Something so simple changed somebody's life. To me, that's so obvious that I think well, it's hardly even worth sharing. That's so obvious. But some people don't know that. And that's why everybody on this screen and whoever's listening to this in times to come, it's like we all have something to offer people, because the reason why we're on this call is because we're interested. And if we're interested, it's because we've had our consciousness poked by truth at some point, whatever that truth be. And we can all help the next person. That man went on to help other people within what he started to do was became a carer. Of all the things, he became a carer for old people. And he said to us one day, he said, do you know what I do when I go to work? He said, I just make people laugh. He said, I just love making people laugh. He started to bring more joy into his work, into his workplace. Oh, Layla, if the past doesn't exist, does that not invalidate our memories? No. No, not at all, love. I am so grateful for my memories. I remember when Lucia was born. I remember when Jen and I got together. I remember my previous partners and wonderful times and difficult times. I share a lot of them on these groups. Doesn't invalidate anything. It doesn't mean it didn't happen. What I'm pointing to is it no longer exists. What the past is, what we call the past, is actually just a ball of memories. That's what the past is. It's thoughts in the now. Our ability to remember, to piece back together an event that took place but no longer exists. It exists within the energetic field of thought. And that's it. It's a potential within the energetic field. And it's interesting about memories, because it's funny, because we speak to somebody sometimes, or we've spoken to people in the past, and we'd say to them, they were pissed off with us about something, or perhaps Jen said something, I said something, and then Jen's held on to that moment. And then we got to speak about it later on, and Jen's been pissed off with me for a couple of weeks or something. I seem to remember this one time.
No, I was just upset.
Yeah, you're upset. And it was like, I said, Jen, look, what is it? And you said, well, you said this at that time. And I said, oh, right. Is that why you've been like you've been? She's like, yeah. That really upset me. That really hurt. I was like, oh, wow. What do you think I meant by that? And so she told me, and I said, no, that's not what I meant. Sorry, there's been a miscommunication there. This memory was carried through time. And the moment we had a conversation about it, it rewrote history. It rewrote the past. It's not saying that that didn't take place. But what I'm saying is that event all of a sudden started to look different. one whole new thought later, you've got a whole new past.
A little bit like in the interview that Dave mentioned with Nick that's on our website. He'd experienced, I'm not sure what kind, but a form of abuse as a child from a step parent. I think he mentioned, he talks about it in his interview, so we've got permission to talk about this. But what he realised, which helped him find forgiveness and peace now, was that the person that did wrong by him acted on thought. And he saw that in his own life, at times he'd acted on thought and been unkind or done things he wasn't proud of, and he found forgiveness and peace. So in no way did it say it didn't happen, but it allowed him to see it differently, find peace with it, and actually find forgiveness for someone who he'd hated in his life. And yeah, I think the more that we recognize that a new thought, a new reality is created 100% of the time, and that can be looking at memories differently, situations differently, a partner, a person, things that might happen in the future. Like one new thought creates a new reality 100% of the time. So how fixed is what we thought before? And we can play with that. Like, we're not saying take our word for it, go away and play with it. Has there been something we've been absolutely adamant about and then changed our mind? Have we really loved something and then not liked it anymore, or vice versa? You see how fluid thought really is. You see how sort of fluid reality is. And it doesn't like belittle it or make it less amazing. I think it makes it even more amazing. Like, wow, whatever we create looks true and real for us. And then we get to recreate and wow. And there's some things I'm not looking to think differently about. Quite happy with it. And then still I might then suddenly think differently about it. I'm like, wow, even more freedom's opened up within me. Because I think I said it on the first day, something I heard in one of Sid's very early talks was, there's no peace to be found in beliefs. That's any belief. Because as soon as we have a belief, we're in the world of form, we're limiting something infinite.
It's like our belief about not wanting to go into hospital, and we wanted this home birth, and
Yeah.
you know, like I said when we were on with Dickon, life is a game of humbling. It's a game of getting lost in your ego, thinking you're right, only for life to bring you something just to humble you. Now, if you're prepared to be humbled, you'll walk through life humble and with a lot more ease and grace than if you're not prepared to be humble. Because we're free. We're totally free to go either way. If we want to walk around thinking, I'm right, we're free to do so. But it's going to make life very, very difficult. You know?
What's cool about that is I have a friend who's pregnant at the same time as me, and she said, the only way I was going to have a baby is if C-section was available. I was never going to do it naturally. She said, the thought of that put me off having children. The fact that I could have an elective C-section was the only way she got to be okay with having a child. And for me, like, the idea of a C-section was the scariest thing, and it was very medicalized. And so you see there, the same thing, two very different experiences. Whose one's right and whose one's wrong? Is there a right and wrong? And actually, in the end, it's what saved Lucy's life. I'm convinced of it. Because if we'd gone for a free birth at home without, she wouldn't be here now. And that was my only option, to have a.
You might not have been here.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the things, because I kind of thought, well, that's really nice for you, but I think the way that I'm doing it's really right. And you just see, God, it's so tricky. This thought thing is tricky. It really, really is. But that's the beauty of the game of it. Like, whoa, I can think I know something and then I can get totally tripped up by it. Again. Oh, I think I've seen something else, and life's going to be smooth sailing from now on. Oh, no, that's going to happen. And I'm going to have all this kind of thought.
It comes back to that saying, doesn't it? I know I'm right, wise, for I know nothing. It's not our knowledge that holds us in a place of security. It's our knowledge that creates our prisons. Not saying there's anything wrong with knowledge. Knowledge is great, but it does limit our capacity to see other options.
It's like us with accounts.
Yeah.
We literally have little mini stresses and breakdowns about accounts that we don't understand. And then to Julie, she's just like, it's really straightforward, actually. If you
Yeah.
understand it, you just need to do this, this, and this. And we're like, oh my gosh, that seems like the biggest thing in the world.
It's like my friend, God bless him. He came to, God knows, he must have been really suffering to come and see me, mustn't he? One of our friends, he's so scientific minded. Dave, you are talking utter shit. And he was really struggling during lockdown. He came and saw me, and I could barely walk up the drive. I mean, this man was foxtrotted. Do you know what I mean? He was just knackered. And he sat down with me, and I listened to him and I talked to him. And then he got up, and he could barely walk. He walked to the window and said, I've got to go now, Dave. I said, all right, no problem. I helped him down the drive. Our drive's quite steep for those who've been, they know. And away he went. So I sent him a few texts, and the next day he texted me and he said, Dave, the alternative views of consciousness aren't really for me. I said, oh, sorry, what do you mean by alternative views of consciousness? He said, well, anything that says that consciousness isn't a product of the brain. So I texted him back and said, but do you not understand? That is the alternative view of consciousness. Now, he's wedded to that idea that consciousness is a product of matter. The brain being the physical matter, material. He's so wedded to that idea that he everything has to fit in to anything he listens to, has to fit into that modality, has to fit into that paradigm. And anything that doesn't is rejected instantly. And so I just texted him back. I said, look, sorry, mate, but that is the alternative view of consciousness.
In my opinion.
In my opinion, yeah. And it's like, but that's what people have to come to it in their own way. I mean, but I just point to the plants. That's why I point to the plants and say, look, you've got a plant there, the mimosa. No brain, but fully aware that it's being touched, and in our own time frame, in our time frame that we like to exist in our reality, we can see it responding to stimulus, which without consciousness it could not respond to stimulus, but it doesn't have a brain. It's true. So true.
But when you were speaking, I'm so glad I wasn't so wedded to my belief that a home birth, natural labour was the best way. Something inside me just knew. I remember the moment I just knew I needed to give up everything I believed and listen to something else. And I'm so grateful, because I have been pretty wedded to my views on what's best and what's right. And now I'm like, I have no idea. I want people to get quiet within themselves and do what makes sense to them. And I'm so grateful that I got to experience that quiet, because it was noisy. There's a lot of opinions and a lot of people sending me information. Oh, this person went 3 weeks over, and I'm like, oh, well, maybe it's okay. And then someone else was like, well, someone I know went 1 week over and it was terrible. And I had so much noise. And like, I had a friend who kept sending me all these articles, and
You knew.
Yeah, I just knew.
You knew. Okay. Right, we're on lunch now, everyone. So we're coming back in
2:30.
2:30 UK time, an
So
hour
it's
and a
2
half.
hours from.
Oh, 2 hours, my
is it?
fault. 2 hours, sorry.
Yeah, 2 hours from now.
It's my maths.
So if you're in America, it's 2 hours from now. I don't know what the time difference is where you are. And we're coming back, and it's time we really would love to hear from people. So I've put in questions, observations, reflections again. So it is an opportunity if you've had something on your mind you'd like to talk about, or if you don't want to speak actually on camera, you can message it in the chat and we'll speak to it. You could either do it privately or
Yeah,
but it really is helpful for other people when you do share.
and that
even
was
if-
sorry, love.
Yeah,
That was a great question. Sorry, love. Say sorry and then carry on. Layla, that was a great question. Really appreciate that.
but yeah, so see you in a couple of hours and have a lovely lunch.
Cool.
And then we've got Gabriella as well.
Yeah,
So yeah, please
Gabby.
stay on for Gabby.
Loads of love.